I think you should go home now, Devin. Get back on San Vicente, take it to the 10, then switch over to the 405 North and let it dump you out into Mulholland where you belong.
That was Saturday Night Live, mining the comedic qualities of SoCal's freeways. And while the roadways usually make us cry and groan more than laugh, they also tell a story about the history of our region. Author Paul Haddad takes us on an entertaining journey through 527 miles of our local highway system in his new book, Freewaytopia. Paul, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
What is Freewaytopia, and why'd you think we need it?
Well, Freewaytopia, the name of my book, kind of came about because there's a duality of LA's freeways. They are both utopian and dystopian. And so I thought Freewaytopia kind of covered both the good and the bad, because you can't tell the story of Los Angeles without telling the story of its freeways.
Our freeway system has its own lexicon.
Well, we all know SIG alerts, which originated from a man named Lloyd Sigmund, who was from Sherman Oaks in the 50s, and he created a system by which if there's traffic, he could alert radio stations, and they could put out a SIG alert for a delay on a freeway, for example. We know about the Hollywood split or the 4-level. These are names of interchanges, which originated in Southern California, this idea of naming interchanges. Many of them were named by eyes in the sky, the traffic jockeys. And of course, you had Bill Keene, who was a very famous traffic reporter, who came up with some better fun nicknames. For example, the East Los Angeles interchange he called Malfunction Junction. And you had the Orange Crush and the El Toro Y in Orange County, these things that we just take for granted now. And we could thank these traffic reporters for coming up with some of this lingo.
Each of LA's 12 freeways gets its own chapter. Tell us a little history, beginning, if you would, with the Arroyo Seco.
Yeah, the Arroyo Seco, when it first was open, people didn't even know what to call it. They called it a stopless motorway, and that seemed too clunky. So they came up with the Parkway because it's a very scenic freeway. Really kind of not the first modern freeway, because it is kind of curvy and the speed limit was limited to 45 miles an hour when it first opened. So then the Hollywood freeway was the first real modern freeway. And then it's no coincidence that most freeways were built from the 50s really through the 70s, because LA's population doubled during that time from 1.5 million to 3 million. And so what I did in the book was I focused on chronologically the opening of all these different freeways from the Arroyo Seco, Chapter 1, up until the Century Freeway, Chapter 12. And these are the more iconic freeways I focused on, like the San Diego Freeway, the Ventura Freeway, even the little Marina Freeway down in Marina del Rey. And by reading these chapters about freeways, you're reading about Los Angeles history and how these freeways came to be.
You know, we know why the San Diego Freeway is called that, right? And the Ventura Freeway, that's where the road goes. But what about the Century Freeway? Why is it called the Century Freeway?
It's named after Century Boulevard. So it's very close to Century Boulevard. And so it was decided it should be called the Century Freeway just because of the fact that it mirrors Century Boulevard. And there are some freeways not named after destinations. The Golden State Freeway. I mean, Golden State, the nickname for California, that's more of a frame of mind, right? Or it's what we imagine California to be. And even the Arroyo Seco Parkway, not really named after a destination, although for several decades that freeway was known as the Pasadena Freeway.
Paul, was there ever a master plan? I mean, who was making all these choices?
The state was making these choices. And really in Los Angeles, you can go back to the Collier-Burns Act of 1947. That was named after Randolph Collier and Michael Burns, who were in the state legislature. And that opened up freeway building through tax funds and things like that, gas taxes, and then the Interstate Act by the Eisenhower administration. So you had a explosion of freeways that coincided with the growth of Los Angeles from the 50s to the 70s. That was also the golden age of freeway building.
It was also a big moment for women engineers.
It was. What you had early on when freeways opened were beauty queens snapping ribbons to open a freeway. But, you know, it was a good old boys club until 1964. Marilyn Jorgensen Reese was the first fully licensed engineer who was a woman in the state of California. And she designed the San Diego Santa Monica interchange. It was the first interchange where cars could drive through at freeway speeds. When you think of old interchanges, you have to really slow down and go through a clover leaf. And her design for that interchange became a model for all interchanges after that.
There were communities that paid the price for our freeway building.
Yes, they did, and you know, we can look right in downtown Los Angeles and just east of downtown. In downtown, you had Bunker Hill, where the Harbor Freeway went through, displacing thousands of people. Boyle Heights, to this day, Boyle Heights and East Los Angeles have about 15 to 18% of their area of their land covered by freeways, and in the county of Los Angeles, it's only 1%. So you have to sometimes look at where the lower income people are, is where freeways were often built.
You also wrote about the freeways that weren't.
Yes, and that's one of my favorite parts to write about, are these just, especially in the 1960s, the state thought that freeways were the answer to everything. They wanted to do 12 freeways through the Santa Monica Mountains. Luckily, we only ended up with 2 of them, the San Diego Freeway and the Hollywood Freeway. But they also wanted to tunnel under the Hollywood sign and convert Angeles Crest Highway to a freeway, and even put a freeway over Santa Monica Bay, which would have been called the Santa Monica Causeway, linking Santa Monica to Malibu to take some of the traffic off Pacific Coast Highway. Luckily, none of these came to fruition.
Paul Haddad's new book is called Freewaytopia. Our own Pat Morrison wrote the foreword. Paul, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa.